Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started with this replay analysis for Ursa. So this is not your game. This is an Immortal game that just ended that had Ursa. I just looked it up to see some of the things that really high MMR Ursa players are doing just to make sure that my belief and what I think should be done is actually getting done in the high MMRs as well. So the first thing I want to talk about is this guy's skill build. So he does start with Fury Swipes and gets Earth Shock, and he goes with 2 points in Earth Shock and skips getting overpowered until level 8. Now, this build up here is pretty dependent on your lane, I would say. In some lanes you want to get Fury Swipes, in some lanes you want to max Earth Shock. In this particular lane versus Mars, I think he felt like he needed the Fury Swipes in order to deal with the damage reduction of the Mars and to be able to trade with him, and then the 2 points in Earth Shock, just because this ability scales incredibly well. It costs the same mana every single level, and there's an additional 10% slow and 50 damage with every single level, and the cooldown gets a little shorter as well. So having a value point in Earth Shock generally feels like a bad decision because it scales so well, whereas having value points and some of the other spells can also be more advantageous. So I personally, when I play Ursa, tend to get between 2 to 3 points in Earth Shock before I go and max my other abilities. And the reason for that is it allows you to farm the lane a little bit more safely and secure range creeps, which we'll talk about in just 1 second. In terms of item build, he also went for the Battle Fury build, similar to what you did. And I just want to talk about the items that he went in which order. So he goes Treads into Fury, into BKB, into Abyssal, Scotty, Satanic. This game he's versus Mars, Puck, Jug, Earth Spirit. And some of these heroes have great abilities for locking him down, particularly Puck with Coil. That's a difficult spell for him to deal with. And there's always the risk of the initiation from Mars with Spear. So he felt like he needed to get a BKB in order to be able to fight with his team. And he got the Fury just to be able to scale as the game continued. So he didn't just go an AFK farm build, and he didn't full commit to the fighting build. But his playstyle and his itemization matched. They aligned. So he had a Fury to farm, and if he wanted to fight, he bought a BKB in order to deal with some of the magic stuff. So we're going to go ahead and go back to your game, which is this one, I believe. Nope. Okay, this game. And we'll talk about the draft and some of the things going into this game that I think we should make sure you're aware of. So first of all, you were the last one to pick on your team, I believe. Yes. Okay, so you picked having vision of everyone except for the Necrophos. Now, that's a little unfortunate that they picked Necro and you picked Ursa. Kind of like I said, just unfortunate. It's a good matchup for the Necrophos. He's always able to kite you. Heartstopper is annoying, and you can't really kill him because of his Ghost Shroud, his W. The other thing to consider when picking Ursa this game is the other 4 heroes, right? And this is what I want to talk about. So this can't be helped. You can't help that they pick Necro, but you can help about the Witch Doctor, the Will, the Nyx, and the Void. So picking any hero in the Faceless Void always feels awful, in my opinion. I really don't like playing versus that hero because I feel like if you're trying to 1v5 the game, which is often the case at these MMRs, that you just get chronoed and he builds pure DPS and your team is too stupid to be able to save you. You also have no save for chrono naturally on your team either. So while that is unfortunate, you do have to draft around it and at least itemize around it a little bit. So understanding the fact that you have no save from chrono means that your hero choices and the items that you build are a little bit more limited. For example, you might not be able to pick a really squishy carry like, let's say I don't know. Let's say like a Arc Warden carry or something, right? Might be a little bit hard because of the chrono, because you'll just get chrono and he'll kill you every fight. Ursa is generally pretty tanky. You generally itemize to be kind of a heavy frontliner. And you have your ulti, of course, which, if you can get it off before chrono, it will basically guarantee that you stay alive. And in the late game, you also have the option of getting Aghanims, which allows you to ult while disabled, which basically it also lowers the cooldown quite a bit. And I think this is an item that would be a priority for me if I was playing Ursa in this game. So you can actually press your ulti while you're chronoed, which means you don't have to react to chrono. You just have to press it as soon as you get chronoed. It also is on a very low cooldown, so when Dark Willow is spamming her Cursed Crown on you, or Witch Doctor's throwing Cask or Coconut, even Necrophos ulti, you can ult while you're stunned by the ult as well. So, the reason I kind of go off on a sidetrack like this a little bit instead of just jumping straight into the replay is because these are all things that you need to be considering and thinking about as you're going into this game. So I think Ursa was a fine pick. Like I already mentioned, it's unfortunate that they picked Necro. You're a little bit countered like that. But you tend to obliterate all of these heroes as soon as you get an Abyssal. You can reliably kill all three of the squishier heroes, and relatively reliably, especially if you get +1 from your LC or something, or even Puck, you can pretty reliably kill the Void, and you don't have to deal with Chrono if he's dead. So we're going to go ahead and jump into this. Now, I watched the first 30 or so minutes of this game and took a couple notes on things that I felt like you would benefit from. First and foremost, I want to mention that I feel like you played the lane relatively well. I think this is a pretty hard lane for you just because you have this absolutely garbage position 5 Puck who goes Blightstone, and I would not be happy about this myself. So, but it is what it is, and we get to deal with other people's incompetence quite a bit. So, general rule of thumb with runes, I used to be really bad about rune fights, and I used to feed a lot, and I used to take a lot of harass, and I kind of realized that something you need to consider before you go to this rune is whether or not it's worth it, right? So, let's say in an ideal world you get the rune every single time. Is it worth it? And the question I'm asking myself is, how much regen do I have to spend versus them, right? So they used a little bit of mana. Oh, I can't see him there. That's weird. He's right here, but I can't see him. So they used a little bit of mana and did quite a bit of damage to you. Now, you only had to use 1 tango in order to be full HP, so this is fine. So every single game, you just have to think about when you're going for this rune, which is this trade going to be beneficial to me? And if not, how bad is it going to be, right? Because let's just say it's an even trade. It's not necessarily beneficial for you because then you're just trading regen. But if you can get the rune, then sometimes it's worth the risk. Another option would be, let's say you're like a Morphling, for example, and you only have 300 HP, you have no move speed, and they have some hero like Mars with an Orb of Venom. That's a rune that you don't even think about because you're just way, way too likely to feed First Blood, which is going to kind of spiral your lane a little bit out of control. So you go for this rune, and you don't commit for the rune, and you kind of lose the trade battle. So I would say either commit or don't in this case. But just going and like poking is going to benefit the heroes with the better level 1 abilities, and Ursa is not a level 1 hero. You have very low base damage. None of your spells are really particularly good. So maybe in this case it worked out because you only had to use 1 tango, but just something to consider as well. Okay, so going in this lane, there are 2 things that you want to think about in every single laning phase. The first and foremost is range creeps. You want to think about how is my lane going to secure range creeps and ideally deny them from the enemy team. And then the other is the exact same thing, but from the flip. How is the enemy team going to secure range creeps and deny mine? And you have to think about those things. The range creeps are so essential to the laning phase, to XP, to gold, and just to really the flow of the game. If one team doesn't get a lot of range creeps, they generally lose. So in your case, you do have a support that has a nuke in order to secure range creeps. So something you can tell this Puck is use orb to get every range creep if you can't get it, right? The other option is that you get your Q and you secure range creeps with your Q. This has the added benefit of you're generally going to be able to harass some of the enemies at the same time, right? So you're going to jump in with your Q, they'll take some damage, they'll get slowed. Maybe you get an auto or 2 off as well. But you need to be thinking about these things going into the lane. All of this stuff can be predetermined, like in the strategy phase, while you're waiting a minute for the rune to spawn. All of it can be discussed, and you don't have to think about it now in the lane, because right now what you're thinking about is, how do I get CS? How do I not take harass? How do I dodge Nick stun? How do I, you've got all these other things going on in your head. So we're going to watch real quick and just see how the flow of the lane goes. Oops, we missed the first one. So you do miss this first range creep. That's unfortunate. One trick with Ursa is, because you have such low base damage, I find that it is beneficial to shove the lane a little bit. Now, you're not trying to like push it under their tower, but you're going to have to attack a little bit more. So you get the first Fury Swipes damage on your auto. And that's kind of confusing the way I said that. So basically, like this creep that's standing right next to you doesn't have any Fury Swipes on it. When you hit it once, it gets one Fury Swipe. But you get that additional 9 damage on the first attack. It's not no damage and then 1 stack and then 2 stacks and then 3 stacks. It starts at like the Fury Swipe is applied before your attack hits. So what you can do is, if you ever need to get a CS that's kind of difficult, you can hit the creep once before. So like hit it there and then hit it again. And then you have an additional 18 damage on that last hit to get it with the Nyx. Or get it versus the Nyx. So that's just a small CSing trick. And you should do that repeatedly throughout the lane. If you ever have a CS that's hard to get, it's getting contested, you can hit it once before and then hit it again. Provided that your first hit doesn't bring it within 1 attack of being denied, that's generally a good practice. The other option is, of course, use your Q, but you skilled your E, which is fine. So, having already watched this lane, you play pretty heads up. You don't go too ham. I would say your CSing is a little bit weak in this lane, just in general, and I think it has to do with your skill build, which we'll talk about as it unfolds. But you are drawing aggro, this is good, and you're repeatedly drawing aggro over and over, trying to get these range creep denies. Like, all of this, very good. Like, exactly what I would do. You're trying to chill a little bit while your support's dead. This is all fine, hitting him. So here, this is where it goes from beneficial to a little bit less beneficial. As soon as you walk into this creep wave here, you need to think about not trading, because look at how much damage you end up taking just from the creeps. Especially because you walk into that bramble, which was kind of hidden. But you want to be very, very mindful of the creep aggro when you're trying to trade with him. So this trade that starts off being pretty favorable to you, just because of the way that you went for that last auto, and that last auto walked you into creep aggro range for the next wave, and kind of made that trade a little bit less favorable for you. So if you had just chilled that last attack, it would be a little better. Okay. We'll fast forward a bit because this is more of the same. Okay, so level 3, you end up going with Overpower, which I think is a pretty big mistake. I think it's personal preference whether or not you get a point in your Q or your E in even lanes, and in hard lanes, you definitely need to get your Q. So this lane, you have a hard time actually trading hits with the enemy heroes. They have Nyx, who's going to stun you, who, if he wasn't an idiot, would have Spiked Carapace instead of Mana Burn. The Willow, of course, is going to kite you with her Bramble Maze and with Shadow Realm, and it's just very hard for you to reliably land a lot of hits off on the enemy heroes. And this is amplified by the fact that you have a completely useless support who has no slow, has no stun, is basically a glorified pull, and just kind of saps XP. So not like the greatest, not the greatest lane for you to be able to hit. The other thing to consider is these heroes are naturally going to push the lane a little bit, especially as your support pulls. And so you being more survivable with like buying a wand like you do, and having more points in your queue is going to allow you to get more last hits. So I think you probably should have put 2 points in your queue here. That way you can secure range creeps for yourself, And you can use it to get last hits like you just did right there. And I'm going to pause 1 sec because I'm getting messages from you. Okay. So your itemization thus far, the amount of region that you've bought, the items that you bought, I felt like was really good. It's really just the fact that you don't have 2 points in your queue and you have this point in your overpower. This ability, the amount of damage that you get from it per mana does not compare with the amount of damage per mana that you get for Urshock in terms of farming. So you already know that you're going to need to farm this game. And that eventually this lane is going to get difficult for you to be in as they get levels. And so having more points in your Urshock is going to let you be able to push the wave and run to like a small camp or a medium camp and farm it with your Q. You can also spam clarities in order to be able to do that since it's a pretty low cooldown at max level. Yeah, so again, you're committing to this skill build that is incorrect. However, that being said, you've played the lane pretty damn well, to be honest. Like, I have very few complaints. My biggest complaint would be this puck existing. I would not be happy with his performance. Okay, so itemization. So a couple things I think about in lanes like this is what do I want to do after the lane and how do my items allow me to do that better? So I don't know if you have in your head here already at 9 minutes that you're going to go this Battle Fury build. The general rule of thumb with itemization for boots and items is if you go Battle Fury, you get treads, and if you don't, you go phase. So the reason for that is phase boots gives you armor, move speed, and damage. And basically nothing else, right? I guess you get the phase ability that lets you walk through things, which is nice, but in terms of farming, it doesn't really help you that much. Battle Fury already gives you the amount of damage you need, and what you really lack is attack speed. So getting the treads and being able to tread switch for the mana, for your Q, to spam it, and having the attack speed to hit creeps is a little bit more min-maxed. And if you go watch Ursa games, primarily, or any melee carry that buys a Battle Fury, primarily any Battle Fury hero buys treads. So PAs, if they rush Deso, they go phase, and if they rush Battle Fury, they go treads. So just kind of get that rule of thumb in your head. Now, that's not always going to be 100% of the time. Sometimes you want the phase boots active or the armor, and you prioritize that more than the attack speed from the treads. But a general rule of thumb is just do that. I'm sorry I'm being a little quiet right now. I'm reading through the messages that you're sending me to make sure I end up talking about things that you would like. Okay. Another thing to talk about here is when to leave the lane. So something that you can do about, I'm going to say 8 minutes in. Basically, as soon as you can jungle effectively, you want to start considering this. How is my impact in the lane hurting the enemies? So if these two heroes are fine statically laning versus you, then you want to out-efficiency them. If they don't want to lane versus you, then you want to stay in the lane longer. So in this case, they're fine statically laning versus you. They're going to burn your mana, they're going to poke you down, they're not going to die to you very easily. And so you want to be in this lane as little as possible in order to minimize how successful they are with what they want to do. And then the other thing that you want to do is you want to maximize how much farm you are. So getting your Ring of Health on Ursa and being able to buy some clarities and clear the wave really quickly with 2 or 3 points in your queue, hit it a couple times, and then run to the jungle is going to be really, really beneficial and allow you to get your items in a timing that is much more impactful. So obviously, like, let's say 60 minutes into the game, you're going to be 6 slotted almost no matter what, right? But if you're 6 slotted 40 minutes into the game, that's a lot more impactful. And even these small things like getting your Fury a few minutes earlier because you're more efficient with your movements can really change the dynamic of the game and allows you to get better items. So you do go jungle. Here, it's like, look at how long it takes you to farm that camp. Imagine if you had 3 points in your queue. You would press Q and you would hit every creep once if you had to. And it just ends up being much faster. Here, this fight ends up being pretty good for you guys. One thing that I wanted to mention, because you'll end up not doing this as much later in the game, is you were very liberal with your ult. It's like they went on you, they started pressing spells on you, and you ulted and you turned it manned up. Since you don't have an Ags, and you can't ulti during Chrono, and you can't ulti during Necrophos ult, making sure that you can get it off early enough to where it keeps you healthy versus the Necro is a really big deal. Here, you're kind of not sure whether or not you want to stay for this fight. I think with the health that you had, you should be looking to TP top and farm. But you end up staying and you fall. And then you TP back bottom. And again, like, you don't want to statically lane versus any of these heroes. So they all have poke, they all have ways of prodding you, and they don't really die to you without items. And so minimizing your lane presence and maximizing your farm is the only way that you're going to be able to carry this game for your team. It's like that. That's what I want to see every time. And they come and contest you and whatever. You leave the creep. Not a big deal. Another thing that I want to talk about is mirroring the enemy's movements. So there are heroes in most games of Dota that you are fine with having near you, even if you don't want to like fight them, and there are heroes that you're not fine with having near you. So a good example of this game is Necrophos, right? Like, you don't want to be anywhere near this hero the entire game. You want to be as far away from him as possible. He's going to kite you, he's going to burn you down, he's going to kill you. The Nyx and the Witch Doctor and the Willow, like, they're annoying to lane versus, but you don't need to go on one side of the map to be as far away from them as possible. So if this Necro wants to come bottom and lane in this lane, you want to go top. And you just want to leave. You don't care. And you do go top here, which is good. So, and I know I've harped on this so much already, but it's really, really a shame that you don't have max Ursa Shock. It's slowing down your farm so much. Okay, so now that you have your Fury, your game plan changes a little bit, right? So you are, of course, you're stronger now in fights than you were, but you want to make sure that your itemization and your playstyle align really closely. So with Battle Fury, you want to be cutting lanes, you want to be farming, you can show up to fights, but you want to show up late. It's not really your job to go and make space. Your job is to, well, how do I say this? Your job is to make space, but it's to make space in a different way. So, like, the way that you make space is you don't run bottom and go fight people. Is like, you cut top wave and you make someone TP to this tower and then you go somewhere else and farm, right? And you're basically using your movements and your items to force the enemy around the map in a way that doesn't endanger you. And that is what you can do in order to make space with your items. Here, this is just really sad. Death, it's so unlucky. It's like, sure, it's easy enough for me to say, yeah, you should have ulted, but, like, I would have died the exact same way. Everybody would have. So your camera movement watching these fights is good. And then you go ahead and TP bottom, and I don't like this. When I watched it the first time, I didn't like it, and I really don't like it this time, the second time. So when you have your Fury, something that you would like to do ideally is farm the Ancients every minute. So if you would TP here, you could have farmed this triangle, then in 20 seconds it would have respawned, and you could have farmed the triangle again. You're also going bottom, which is kind of where the enemy wants to live. So here in the replay, we can see that they have wards all over the place if you look at the minimap, whereas they have like none in this top area. So you guys are a little bit on the back foot. You don't really want to have 5v5 team fights. And so you want to be farming in the most safe place that you can while still being somewhat aggressive. So if you farm this triangle, right, it respawns, you can walk top, you can keep this lane shoved, you can hopefully force a TP to this tier 2, and you can be relatively safe this whole time, especially if you see people showing mid. And I don't know, I think you got to prioritize these Ancients. And there's just simply not as much farm here. Even yeah, see, the enemy just wants to live down here. Okay, let's talk about itemization again really quick. So you end up going for the Basher here, and I want to, if you were here, I would ask you, how does this Basher change the way that you play the map? Obviously, it changes the way that you can kill a hero. Like your kill threat on a particular hero is higher. Not so much so. You have to get pretty lucky with your bashes in order to kill someone, but it doesn't change where you can be on the map, which I think is a bad thing at this point. So you have this Fury, which is your farming item, and you want to be able to get an item that allows you to take over more of the map. So Basher doesn't allow you to do that, right? Like, if they run at you, you're still going to die, even if you have Basher. However, if you have a BKB, or if you have, like, a Sanjin Yasha, or a Manta, or, you know, fill in the blank, whatever item you feel like you need, then it changes where you can stand on the map and where you can farm. It also changes how many heroes have to show up in order to kill you. And that just allows you to play a lot more freely. So I think if you are going BKB this game, which you're going to need eventually, this would be the time to pick it up. It's fine to go battle for your BKB. You don't even have to press it. Honestly, just the fact that you have it is going to change the way that heroes show. So when you get this Battle Fury, realistically, the only way you die is to Chrono plus Scythe. Chrono plus Scythe. And so if you see any one of those heroes on the map, then the rest of the map is open to you. With the Basher, that's not the case. If you have Basher, you're still going to die to either Chrono or Scythe, but not both. Like, it doesn't have to be both, that's what I'm trying to say. And then, honestly, like, any two of them can really threaten your life. So, a game where Basher would be a better item here is if you are already owning the game, and all you really need is to be able to lock down heroes in order to kill them. But you don't need to, like, you're already survivable. And here you're not survivable enough. And this bash is just ludicrous. I couldn't believe that. So again, we'll watch. And like, you want to go fight with this Basher, but it doesn't change how you survive. And it kind of like baits you into thinking that you can take fights that you can't. So yeah, I would prioritize like getting in Aghanims, maybe. Like you could have probably even farmed your Ags right here, or BKB would be the two items that are going to help you change the way that you play the map. You guys do get a great fight. Of course, this is the 3K bracket, I think, so there's going to be ample opportunities for both sides to throw. And I feel like you never use your Q to farm, like ever. You have all this mana and all this mana regen that like you've invested in or have neutral items for, and you never really use it except for your W. So here, this is good that you're pushing because you see people bottom. And notice how people TP and you can just run away. And this is the kind of movement that you want to be making throughout the whole game. And again, we talked about when you have BKB, it changes which heroes have to show in order to kill you. And so you get to force more TPs. I think it's smart that you're swapping these out in order to heal up after a fight. That's something I don't see a lot of people do, but that's a good idea. And like where you're farming right now, this is fine. Like your team is defending, you're just hitting creeps. Like you're watching, and this is all like very, very good. It's just a shame that it took you 35 minutes to play like this. So now you do die. You do die. Okay, I want to talk about this, right? So I want to talk about why I think this is a good death. I think this TP was a bad TP just because it's like, it's not going to happen. And it's probably better if you run. But I want to talk about why this is what I consider to be a decent death. So the enemy team, what were they doing right before? Like they were hitting this high ground, basically 5v3, right? Like they have 5 heroes in this area, roughly. And your LC's dead and you're splitting bottom. And look at how much space you create in this game. Like, even though you die, you make Nyx show, you make Witch Doctor show. They have to leave the high ground push because they can't be there anymore. You get Chrono to be used. Like, the amount of stuff that gets accomplished by this is very high. Now, I think, like I said, I think this BKB TP is a little much. I think you can just try to run or just accept your death. Of course, if you can, try to get your ulti off before the chrono, but that's kind of hard to do. But this is like what I consider to be a death that like accomplished something. You didn't just feed, like you accomplished a lot of things here. So ideally you don't die, right? Like you should be looking at that and say, okay, how do I not die in this situation? And maybe it's when you're done hitting this tower, you go and you jump in the trees and you TP. That way it's harder for them to find you. Or you don't like run left and you just like stay way right so they don't get vision of you, or you know, something like that, right? And you can go look at these situations in your games and say, okay, how could I have made the same play and maybe not have died? But if I die, so what, right? It's like 60 seconds, chrono's down, they're getting nothing on the map, your team is farming. And look at that. They don't have Chrono and Faceless dies. And Willow. Like, in a very large sense, you accomplished that. And here, you're going to get a kill. You buy the dust. That's good. It gets you your Abyssal too. I'm not 100% sure why you back up here instead of just keep pushing. They have 3 dead. The heroes that threaten you are all gone. Like, there's nowhere on the map that you're afraid of being because you can just walk away from everyone. And I would be thinking about Roche. I don't know if it's up. So it is up. You guys at least should have checked since it's been a while since you Roached. But that would have definitely been the play. Like, either keep pushing bottom or sprint to Roshan. Because now they have Chrono and everybody's alive and it's harder for you to Roche. Whereas before, even if both of the heroes showed up, Nyx and Necro, if you get your spells off, you're not going to die. So here, you don't get your spells off, but that's life. Goodness. What the heck is this? Where are his boots? Okay. So we'll just fast forward because the game's over here. And I'm going to go read through your notes and make sure that we covered each topic. Okay, so you told me that you feel like drafting, like your hero pick, was something that you felt like you struggle with. Okay. So other than the Necrophos, I think this is a fine Ursa game. The lane's a little tricky just because of your pause 5. I would have probably asked if they could switch lanes, even if they played like the same itemization and stuff, just because Treant allows you to do a lot more in the lane. There are a couple options that you had for this game that I think were okay. I think Ursa was a very decent choice. I think Juggernaut was also fine. Lifestealer is fine. Wraith King's also a really good pick. I don't know what was banned, but Wraith King, like, obviously great versus Faceless Void. Even Troll Warlord would have been okay. Any of these heroes that are innately relatively survivable and aren't too dependent on having a golden landing phase in order to be farmed. Itemization throughout the game. So we already talked about your skill build a little bit, and we've talked about your itemization as well. I think having an Aghanims is a pretty much guaranteed must this game. And you had queued up a Butterfly right at the end, but I think Nullifier would be good versus the Necro. In terms of the order of your items, since I felt like all the items you actually bought were completely fine, I think you needed the BKB before you needed Abyssal. We talked about this before, but I'll reiterate again. The Basher didn't change the way that you played the game. The BKB did. And so getting your BKB allows you to get your Basher faster and be safer. When and where to do objectives. Okay, so when and where to do objectives. It's a very general statement. In general, you want to try and force the enemy to do something and then capitalize on it. So you want to, like, bait a BKB or bait a Chrono or fill in the, bait blank X or fill in the blank and then go Roche. So when you died in the bottom lane that last time after you were pushing their high ground tower and they had no Chrono and then they died, you TP'd bottom and kind of ran, like, you TP'd bottom, you got a kill on the Witch Doctor, and then you ran back to your base. And that was the time to do an objective. The objective specifically was Roshan. But that was, like, the reason that was the time to go was because not only were heroes dead, but even if they weren't dead, spells were on cooldown. He can't Chrono you in Roche when it's on cooldown. So I would be looking to run into Roche at that time. But yeah, like I said, just in general, you're trying to force something, and then you take an objective when the enemy doesn't have spells or doesn't have heroes. Okay, was playing an Archon. Jump to High Legend. Boosted account buyers here. There may be. I don't know where all the boosted or account buyers go. So I think I'm probably going to end this video right about here. I know you mentioned that your Treant was AFK. I didn't really watch any of your teammates' game because I don't feel like you should really play too much around your teammates. So, like, if your teammates are somewhere, then you can't expect them to help you in a different part of the map. And that's basically the extent of how you should be playing with your teammates in this bracket, or how you should be relying on them. Really just honestly don't. Like, just don't rely on them. Do your job. Do it well. If they don't show up to push a tower or go to Roche, then, like, maybe it changes that you don't go Roche because you don't want to throw the game. But you're not going to be able to get people to do what you want. It's just generally better for you to just play as cleanly as you can. And even though you're not going to win every game, you're going to win a lot of games. I've been applying that in my games recently, where I just play my own game, and I mean, I'm winning a lot, so I feel like it generally works even in higher ranks. Okay, I'll end it there.